Hi guys, sorry I got cut off there. Ran out of storage, so I had to delete my stuff from my phone. So talking about the Children's Internet Protection Act of 2000, basically what it did was it required schools and public libraries to have this filtering software. And the appeals court said this is unconstitutional because these places should be places where people can access knowledge, not be restricted to it. But the Supreme Court actually upheld the law in 2003. So the Children's Internet Protection Act of 2000 is still in effect, but the Child Pornography Act of 1996 is not. All right, copyright or intellectual property ownership. It's designed to ensure that those who create content are financially compensated for their work. So technically, copyright rules do apply to the internet. So basically, you can't take something that someone has copyrighted and use it for your own use. If you are caught doing that, you could be sued. But a lot of times what happens is that there's so much of it going on out there that it's just not caught. And another thing that can happen is sometimes there is a difficulty of assigning authorship of who actually owns a phrase or an image or a piece of music if there's multiple people that went into creating it. The Digital Millennium Copyright Act of 1998 basically brought U.S. copyright law into compliance with that of the World Intellectual Property Organization. The U.S. actually had kind of lax copyright laws compared to the rest of the world, but in 1998 they decided to kind of have similar copyright laws to the rest of the world, which makes sense because something that's created in Europe or Asia or Africa and is used in the United States, kind of the same standards should apply because we're kind of a global society. The Digital Millennium Copyright Act. So what does it do? First of all, it makes it a crime to circumvent anti-piracy measures built into commercial software. So there are measures that a lot of software companies take to make sure that their software can only be used by the person that purchased it, and you can't like burn CDs of it and make copies of it for all your friends. Also, a lot of movies that come out on DVD have anti-piracy protection built into it, so you can't try to burn a copy of the DVD for someone else. It outlaws the manufacture, sale, or distribution of code-breaking devices used to kind of illegally copy that software. So there are devices out there that can break the protection of things that are copyright protected, but you're not supposed to actually make those or sell those or get those. It permits breaking of copyright protection devices to conduct encryption research and to provide security systems. So basically, hackers can hack into stuff if they're part of a legitimate government attempt to improve security. So they have to be getting paid to do it by a legal entity. It provides copyright exemptions for nonprofit libraries, archives, and educational institutions under certain circumstances. So if you're doing something for like a school project, it's not subject to copyright. Like I was doing a school project one time on different wedding dresses, and I was trying to blow up these images I had from magazines, and Kinko's didn't want to do it at first because of copyright issues, but when I told them it was for a school project, and they're like, okay, so that's okay to use. It limits the copyright infringement liability of internet service providers for simply transmitting information over the internet. But ISPs are required to remove material from users' websites that appears to constitute copyright infringement. So basically what that's saying is the ISP is not responsible if it's home to something that gets posted on there that is copyrighted. So for example, if someone records a portion of the Howard Stern show and posts it on YouTube, YouTube is not criminally liable for having it on their platform because there is no way they can monitor everything that gets loaded to YouTube on a regular basis. But it does say that if they are alerted to it, like if someone from the Howard Stern show calls and says, hey, you need to take this down, then they need to take it down. It also requires webcasters, so those who broadcast music over the internet, to pay a licensing fee to record companies. So if you work for a radio station and you pay a record, you got to pay a fee for that music. And they're just saying that this also applies to the internet. You can't just run like a radio station on the internet and say, oh, I don't have to pay for it because it's not being played on the radio. And so you're still playing it, you're still using it, you still have to pay for it. And it states explicitly that fair use, instances in which copyrighted material may be used without permission or payment, such as taking brief quotes from a book, applies to the internet. So anyone writing a paper can take a brief quote from a book as long as it's attributed and not be in copyright violation. You can also play a snippet of a song, like 10 seconds long, or play a snippet of a TV show and not be in copyright infringement. And that's how you have shows like Daniel Tosh's show, or other shows that show like clips of funny videos, and they don't get in trouble for copyright use because they play such a small clip of that, and they're not trying to make money off of that per se, but off of their own show that they're doing, that they're covered under that kind of act. Privacy. So privacy is the right to be left alone, and it's now the right to maintain control over our own data. So there's two facets to this. There is protecting the privacy of communication we want to keep private. So it's basically saying who can read your emails, who can read your instant messages, who can read your texts, and the use and misuse of private personal information willingly given online. So you might say, well, who willingly gives their private information online? Well, anytime you make a purchase online, you're giving that company your banking information. You're giving them your credit card number. You're giving them your address. You're giving them your phone number. So you are willingly giving information online, but those companies are expected to, kind of keep it private. So how do we protect privacy and communication? Well, in 1986, the Electronic Communication Privacy Act came out, and it guaranteed that the privacy of our email similar to the privacy of telephone calls. So if you have a personal email account, it's supposed to be private. People aren't supposed to be able to access your personal emails or your personal telephone calls, unless, of course, you're accused of a crime. And then we all know, we've all watched Dateline, and we've all watched like 2020, and we know the police can get your phone records and your email records. Also, this applies to personal email and personal phone calls. If you have a business email or like a Lincoln email or a business phone, that stuff can be monitored, and oftentimes is. In 2013, Edward Snowden came out, and he leaked a lot of information online about the NSA, and he did it to show that the NSA was doing stuff that, people didn't know about, like spying on U.S. citizens. And he thought that even though this information was private and could potentially jeopardize national security, that the privacy concerns were more overriding, that citizens had the right to know that the NSA was monitoring them. And so, he's still a fugitive. He's still living out of the country, because if he comes back to the country, he could be arrested. The government does track online activity to look for suspicious patterns. This is how they a lot of times bust terrorist cells or find people that are trying to engage in, acts with minors. So there's some tension there that's inherent between, yes, ensuring our national security, but also protecting our personal privacy. And what is more important, and when does the government cross the line? So there's a lot of people that say that they're willing to sacrifice some freedoms to protect national security, but there's others saying that no, our privacy is more important, and the government doesn't have a right to spy on us if we haven't done anything wrong. So that's kind of the debate there, is when does government monitoring start to intrude on our right to privacy? There's also the term willing suspension of our privacy. So a third of Americans say they're willing to exchange basic personal information with a website in exchange for compelling content. So they're saying, I really want to see this video, so I'm willing to give this website my phone number, my email address, just so that I can watch this video. Data valence, that's the massive collection and distillation of consumer data gathered by a digital trail. So what happens is information is distributed and shared among organizations other than the one for whom it was originally intended. So anytime you sign up for something online, like let's say you sign up for a newsletter, or you sign up to get emails from a company because you want to get like a discount code, you got to read that stuff carefully, because a lot of companies will say in the fine print, you're sharing this data with us, but we're also going to make this data available to others. And the reason they make the data available to others is because there are companies out there who buy contact information from legitimate companies, so that they can reach out to those people with phone calls, telemarketing, all kinds of things. There's also electronic tracking of the choices we make when we are online. It's called our click stream. Again, if you click on anything, the internet knows about it. The internet knows what you're clicking on and what you're looking at. So don't think that you are having any privacy on what you're browsing online. Now, in 1974, the Federal Privacy Act restricted the government's ability to collect and distribute information about citizens. And of course, that's all been undone by the Patriot Act. The Consumer Privacy Bill of Rights in 2012 said voluntary guidelines suggesting sites place a do not track button on their web pages. So they basically told companies, put a button on your website that people can click that says that you won't track their movements. But it's voluntary, it's not required. But the button would have an opt-in versus opt-out feature, so you could choose whether or not you wanted your activity tracked by this website. European Union privacy law requires internet companies to get explicit user consent before using their data and grants citizens the right to be forgotten. So the right to ask to have all their collected personal data deleted forever. So actually, privacy laws are more strict in Europe than they are in the United States. And there are a lot of people who are saying that the United States should adopt some of these European privacy laws so that they can ask internet companies, hey, scrub our data. We don't want our information to be saved by you. There are RFID chips. Those are grain of sand sized microchips and antenna embedded in consumer products that transmits a radio signal. So basically, it's a little tiny chip. You wouldn't even notice if it was on a package that tells someone, hey, this item is in this location. The more common place you'll see these is if you've ever been in an Amazon store, like a physical Amazon store. In bigger cities, there's physical Amazon stores where you literally can go in the store, grab stuff, and walk out of the store. And then your Amazon account automatically gets charged. And you might be like, well, how do they know what I took? It's because everything you take has one of these RFID chips in it, and it can track movement and activity, and it can actually monitor you. I mean, if it wanted, they can make these RFID chips so that they record video and audio. AR, alternate reality, permits users to point their smartphones at a real-world location, person or scene, and be instantly linked to hundreds of websites containing information about those things superimposed over the screen image. So the idea is you would point your phone at a restaurant, and you would automatically have items coming up on your screen that had information about those restaurants, like maybe Yelp reviews or the menu or things that you could click on to find out more information about that restaurant. Obviously, that's a huge violation of privacy if you start pointing your camera at a person and start getting all kinds of links to information about them. The information's already out there, though. I mean, if you've ever Googled yourself, you know that you've got some information out there that can come up. And, just this AR version is a little bit easier way of doing it. Cloud computing, I'm sure a lot of you use the cloud. It's basically storage of data on third-party environments. And so you do use that like when you run out of room on your phone and you want to store your pictures, you use the cloud, so you can have pictures and videos saved to the cloud. You can have documents saved there too. And so that means just because you delete a text doesn't mean it's gone, because it can still be in the cloud. IoT. The idea behind IoT is that almost everything we use can be connected to the internet. And so one of the things I want to talk about was Tostitos. So Tostitos had this idea that they were going to put an RFID chip in every bag of their chips. And the idea was that they could monitor activity at parties, because a lot of times you use Tostitos chips at parties. And what they were doing was monitoring how much alcohol was being consumed at these parties. And then they were sharing that information with law enforcement, and law enforcement would use that to conduct sobriety checkpoints, near these places where these parties were happening. And when you think about it, stopping drunk driving sounds really good, but it's also kind of a huge violation of your privacy if you buy a bag of chips and don't know that you're being monitored. Vizio is a television company that was really kind of investing in this AR technology we talked about, but eventually had to back off of it. Your click stream. Every click of the key can be, and often is, recorded and stored. And sometimes it's just simple because people want to record what you're looking at so they can market to you and sell you things that you like, but also can be a little bit disconcerting. So cookies are identifying codes added to a computer's hard drive by a visited website. And you may notice that if you ever go to a website and you're wanting to access that website, it might be like, this website uses cookies. So they're basically telling you that, yeah, this website's going to track your activity, but to see it, you have to agree to it. So normally it's a site that remembers you, and that's why when you go onto some sites, it'll have your information and it'll be like, "Hi, Gloria, welcome back." Or like if you enter your credit card information, it'll already have your credit card information saved. Some sites bring third-party cookies to your computer, so it's basically other entities other than the one you are visiting have access to your clickstream. Spyware. Spyware is identifying code that can be placed on a computer by a website without permission or notification. So basically, what some of these cookies do is they put spyware on your computer, and you don't know about it. And they're getting all kinds of information from you every time you use the internet, and you don't even know that that information is going out. So most commercial browsers have the capacity to block or erase cookies. So like if you use Google Chrome, you can set it up so that you're going to automatically block and erase cookies. The downfall to that then is that there's going to be some websites you can't access because those websites say in order to access us, you have to let the cookies in. There is cookie scrubbing software, programs that block and erase spyware and allow users to surf the web anonymously. So if you're willing to pay for that, that is an option. So the idea of virtual democracy, the idea that the internet can help further the cause of democracy. So right now we have something called net neutrality, and it's the requirement that all ISPs, including cable MSOs, allow free and equal flow of all web traffic. So basically what they're saying is Verizon or Mediacom or whoever provides your internet service can't slow down traffic to one website, but allow faster traffic to another website. And the danger behind that is that they were afraid, like, let's say we have a Trump presidency and Trump hates CNN. He does. He hates CNN. So theoretically, he could pressure Verizon to be like, anyone that goes to CNN, I want you to slow down their internet speed. And obviously net neutrality would not allow that to happen. They're basically saying all sites have to have the equal flow of traffic. So again, concentration and conglomeration, we see this in every industry, and the internet is no different. Google and YouTube are huge companies, huge media giants that kind of have almost a monopoly on what they do. Google's the #1 search engine. Yeah, there's other search engines out there, but no one really uses them. And then YouTube. Yeah, there are other sites out there where you can post videos, but YouTube is the main one. TikTok is kind of encroaching on their territory a little bit, but YouTube's still #1. Microsoft and Skype. Microsoft obviously is pretty much on every PC. Skype kind of has a monopoly on video conferencing, although now we're seeing that Zoom is kind of taking over. We're seeing that now with the pandemic, everyone's using Zoom. LinkedIn and Yammer are apps that kind of have control over a large segment of the population. Facebook and Instagram, almost everyone uses that. There's not other social media sites that kind of reach the heights of popularity that those two do. WhatsApp is starting to become more popular. Verizon, one of the biggest ISPs out there. Yahoo, still a huge company, and Tumblr. And then, of course, AT&T, DirecTV, and Time Warner. These are all multi-faceted conglomerations. AT&T, you think phone, but they own so much more than phone service. They offer internet service. They own multiple cable TV channels. They own magazines, and same thing with Time Warner. So there's a lot of companies out there that are just huge and have their fingers in so many different pies. And then Arab Spring. This was a short-lived technology-fueled rebellion against Middle East repression. So you guys might not remember this, although this happened probably while you were in high school, so you might have heard about it. But basically, people like Yasser Arafat and other This happened in Libya and this happened in Egypt, where basically people came together to overthrow their government because they were tired of human rights violations and they were tired of being oppressed. And a lot of these coups were actually organized using the internet. People connected online to agree to meet at this place at this time for this purpose. And it actually showed how the internet could help people organize and successfully, overthrow a dictatorship. So, that's pretty powerful that the internet could do that. The technology gap. So there's a widening disparity between the communication technology haves and have-nots. So the people that have access to the internet and the people that don't. And there are people who don't have access to the internet, one, because they might live in a rural area. Two, they might not have the money to have internet service. Or three, there might be people who just didn't grow up with this technology and so don't know how to use it. For example, my mother, who is almost 70, wanted to know if there was a way she could view the funeral of her friend's dad because it was going to be on the internet. And I said, Mom, you don't have the internet. She's like, oh, I know, but I want to know if there's a way I can watch the video anyway. And I'm like, how are you going to watch the video on the internet if you don't have the internet? But she just had no concept that there was not a way around that. So she's a technology have-not, kind of through her own doing. But the idea is if democracy is increasingly practiced online, those lacking the necessary technology and skill will be denied their vote. So the idea is that, yes, we're furthering democracy online, but not everyone has access to that, and they should, because democracy is something that everyone should be able to participate in. So 13% of people in the United States do not use the internet. And they fall on the one side of the digital divide. It's the lack of technological access among specific groups of Americans. And so what a lot of people have tried to do, a lot of government administrations have tried to do, is expand internet services, especially into rural areas. And they do that a lot of time through providing computers and internet access to schools. Because the idea is that even the poorest people that live in the most rural outlying areas that probably wouldn't be able to have internet access, they can at least go to school and have access to the internet in that location. Libraries are a great source for that too. Usage rates lag for those with less education. So people who are less educated have less access to the internet. People with disabilities have less access to the internet. Those with lower incomes, obviously, those in rural areas. Also, Hispanic and African American households don't use the internet as much as white households do. And less affluent elderly people with disabilities. So a lot of elderly people who are homebound who really could benefit the most from the internet don't have access to it. But think about it. If you're elderly, if you're disabled, if you have trouble getting out and getting groceries and having stuff brought to your home, think of how much easier your life would be if you had access to the internet and could have stuff delivered and automatic shipping set up, and they just don't have access to it. And so the technology gap leads to the information gap.